Hi, this is Margaret Byrd, and welcome to Color Quest, and welcome to my front porch. Today we have some sun, and it's cool but crisp, and I just felt like filming out here. Now, today's Color Quest video is going to visit an herb, and this is an herb that comes in the form of a berry, and that is elderberry. I have looked at red elderberry here on Color Quest last year when I foraged it in my local park forest. I do not have blue elderberry, so that is what we're going to look at today. A few weeks ago, I tried some blue elderberry in an Easter egg natural dye video, so go check that out if you haven't seen that. And it produced almost like a brownish color. But I know from doing a little bit of research, elderberry is, guess what? pH sensitive. So join me today as we look at blue elderberry, play around with the pH and see what kind of a varied palette we may find with this herbal wonder. So first things first, today I'm going to be dyeing a piece of organic cotton, and therefore I want the best possible chance that the elderberry dye that I'm going to make will bond well with the cellulose fiber cotton. And although I have used things like soy milk binder, I am going to give it the absolute best chance, and that is by doing probably the strongest mordant option, a combination of a tannin soak followed by an alum soak. So before we start that process, however, the very first thing you need to do anytime that you start a dye project is to wash your fiber. So let's do that, and then we'll start the mordant process. So while that's busy sudsing up in my washing machine, know that an alternative to that is what's known as a scour. I am not going to be scouring. That is a little bit more of a deep clean, and I feel pretty good, at least in today's project, using simply my washing machine and some pH neutral soap. Now, I had a video here a few months ago when I looked at tannin and alum as mordant options in a natural dye kit that I worked through with you here on Color Quest. I still have the remnants of those two mordants because you can keep mordants around for quite some time if you label them and keep them someplace cool. You may need to add some additional mordant to them, but I barely used them last time, so I'm gonna feel pretty confident that they're in good shape. So here I have my two mordants. This is the tannin mordant. It's already been mixed up, obviously. You can see the tannin down below sort of floating in the liquid. And this was a 10% oak gall tannin, meaning 10% the weight of fabric. Now, I'm not going to be able to reweigh this, obviously. I will weigh my fabric, but I'm feeling pretty confident it'll be sufficient to be able to adapt for and give good mordant coverage from a tannin perspective. Then this is my alum. And the ratio for this was measured at 20% based upon the weight of the fabric at the time. Now, again, I don't know what that percentage is going to be like, but with alum, you can be working in the 10, 15, 20% realm and be fine. I think using the tannin and the alum combo is going to be good enough to give me some great mordant binding onto the cotton fiber I have. So here I have my washed cotton. This is a produce bag. It is 100% natural, and it is meant to replace plastic bags in the produce department. So I thought it would be fun to dye this in a natural color. And also it won't be too precious. It'll get used and dirty and fade, and then I can always just dye it again with something else. So weighing this, it comes in at a little less than 2 ounces. So the weight is not very significant. It has just been pulled out of the washing machine, so it is still wet. However, if you wash your fiber and then you don't use it and you let it dry, remember that anytime you put fiber into a dye pot, whether it be for mordant or dye itself, you are gonna wanna wet it. Now, this is wet, but I'm just showing this for you, that if you have allowed your fiber to dry, just get it wet again. And then what we're going to do is actually work with the tannin first. And I will be using both of these as a cold soak. So first step, tannin. Now, when I opened this up, you can see there's a little bit of mold that formed, no problem. I'm just gonna strain this as I put it into my dye pot. That'll catch the mold here, and you can do this with dyes as well. We'll have another video on that very soon. Pour that through, and we have our tannin mordant ready to go. Don't have to heat it up. You can heat it up if you want, but I'm not going to. We will simply take the fiber here and put it into the mordant. If I need to add some water to make sure that it's completely covered, I can do that. There isn't a lot of fiber here, so I think that'll be sufficient, and we'll let that have a good soak. It will sit in here for 1 hour, and I will turn it occasionally throughout that hour just to make sure that the tannin is getting to all the different parts of the fiber. So this is kind of a fun part of being able to be super efficient. So while the fiber is having its tannin soak, and that's a cold soak again, for the next hour, I could leave it in for longer, 2 hours overnight. The longer, maybe the better. We'll see how our timing goes today. I'm going to make the dye, because that will also take some time to make. And today's dye, as you know, is going to be elderberry. Now, elderberry, with its bits of reddish blue, could be sensitive to heat. So I'm going to be very cautious with the heat as well. And I will allow these to soak for a while so that the color can come naturally just through a soak process, and then maybe gently heat them to see if we can pull a bit more of the color out. But I'm going to be watching that heat super carefully. And in order to continue to work on water conservation, the water that I just had for soaking the fiber, I'm going to now use that same water to start my soaking process with my elderberry. So since I don't have the blue elderberry near me here locally, I'm going to be relying on some dried organic elderberry. Now, I've used Star West Botanicals before. They have lots of different herbs and food grade plants. So they are a great option for finding potentially dye sources that you can't find locally. So these are dried, and it's going to be a little hard for me to know what the right volume is going to be for these. So I'm gonna go with a 1-to-1. They're pretty light, but since I have about 2 ounces of fiber, I will measure out about 2 ounces of the elderberry. I'm gonna put them into that water that I had shown you. And I'm simply first just gonna let these sit. You can see they're already giving up some color. I think I will allow this to sit for like an hour maybe, or 30 minutes, just to give that just a cool start, which shouldn't impact the color, whereas heat may in fact alter the color slightly, particularly if I'm not careful. So let's let that sit while we're doing our tannin soak, and then maybe when we work on the alum step, we'll go ahead and put this on a very low heat. So pretty. One thing led to another, and I got busy doing other things. So I went ahead and left this overnight for the soak, both of them. So now I'm going to take this out. You know, soaking it overnight, more time in the tannin. You can do it for an hour, you can do it for a day. Knowing that maybe the longer you put it in, stronger it may be. So I'm going to do a very quick rinse on this. And then we'll switch to the alum. Trying to catch the water, doing a little conservation, drying. And as I mentioned, you can save these and reuse them. You may eventually have to add some more tannin, but that can always be the base of your tannin mordant. So you always have a little extra oomph in there. As I mentioned, this is alum, not aluminum acetate, but aluminum potassium sulfate. And the tannin-alum combo can be used with this form of alum. And I mixed this up previously. This was mixed to a 20% weight of fabric based upon what I dyed last time. I don't remember what that was. I just know that this is going to have a decent amount of alum in it. I could always use this as a base, measure my fiber, which I did at 2 ounces, and then do 20% of that weight and add it to this. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not overly concerned about the strength right now. With alum, you can work with 10, 15, 20% weight of fabric. It's kind of a recipe, a choice, a decision for yourself. There may be some differences based upon the kind of dyes you're working with, but in general, I'm not overly concerned. You can be very precise and exact, or you can, you know, work like I do and be a little more loosey-goosey. Now, again, it looks like there's a tiny bit of mold in these, or at least in this one. No harm in mold. I'll say it again. So I will strain it out when I put it into this pot. Add this. Save your jars because you will be saving this alum as well. And this is going to be cold again. You can heat this up if you want on the stove, but it's not necessary. So I'm just going to let it sit in here cold. This one, it's recommended for maybe 2 hours. So I will let it sit here. And while that's happening, I'm going to take this, which, wow, it's gotten so much color. I mean, that's just from a cold soak. I'm going to give it a very gentle heat and see if we'll coax a tiny bit more while this is soaking in its alum. And then, guess what? We'll be ready to dye. Look at that color. So this has been sitting in a very gentle heat, sort of steeping for, gosh, most of the afternoon, probably 3 or 4 hours. I decided just to let it sit and absorb as much color as possible. I'm going to wring this out now and rinse it so that I can get any excess elderberry off of the fibers that haven't stuck. You can see quite a bit of it coming away from the fiber. I will take what I rinse and I will just put it back into the dye pot in case I decide to dye again. So here's the first round of dye. Here is where I started, just to give you a sense of where it was. It did take on a little bit of tannin color, so it was a little bit more yellow, but we got this really pretty neutral. It has a very brown tone to it, and I think partially that's because of over dyeing on a tannin base. So I think I might let this dry and put it in one more time to the dye, give it another soak. I want to have it nice deep color, or as deep as it's going to get, before I work on the pH shift, because I'm hoping it's going to be significant enough to make a difference here on this. So let's let this dry. We'll do one more soak in the dye, and then we will bring in our friends baking soda and vinegar. I'm going to test a little bit first before I go ahead and put in my produce sack. So quick lesson on pH, if you've seen my videos before, basically a neutral pH starts with 7, that's like your tap water. And then you can take your pH in either direction. You can take it more acidic by adding things like vinegar or lemon juice, or you can take it more alkaline by adding things like baking soda or soda ash, which you can make from baking soda. It's a little bit stronger in the alkaline world. I have some pH test strips here. You can look to see what your state is. I did test this out first with fiber. I have those pieces here. This was the elderberry just on silk by itself with a neutral pH. Then I shifted it and I added the vinegar and got this darker color for the acid shift, and then for the alkaline shift I got this really pretty greenish gray color, but you can see the 3 different shades. So now I'm going to try it with these fibers. I have 2 silk fibers and 2 cotton fibers. They're all pretty neutral, pretty, very like sort of pinkish color, a pink neutral color. So very simply, I'm going to make myself a little bath here. I will take half a teaspoon of vinegar into this and add some water to it. And then I will add a half teaspoon of baking soda as well. Make a little bath out of that. If I wanted to do a quick test to see where that went, I can simply take off a strip here, dip it in to the acid bath. I would say I took it to about a 5 pH, and then we'll try the base. We'll see. Ooh, pretty. Okay, and yeah, actually that may have gone all the way over to 10. So starting at 7, 8, 9, 10. So maybe a little bit stronger. This is a piece of cotton. I'm going to take the 2 different ends and place them into each one. And I'm going to let these sit. We'll see what we get, if we get much of a shift either direction. See how I can do this. Haha. Also cotton. And then we'll try the silk here on this side. Okay. I can already see it changing, at least on this side. It's working its way up. You can see there must have been some alkaline here, up here. So it is working its way up the fibers. It definitely works. pH sensitive. All right, let's let that sit and see what happens. Oh, this is actually happening faster than I thought it might. Although I guess it does sort of happen instantaneous, but because the solutions are working their way up the fibers, they're actually gonna meld into this other one. So I'm gonna pull them out now, do a quick rinse, and then we can look at them and see how different they are. Now these are still wet. I rinsed them off, but you can see there's definitely a shift in color. I don't see it as much on the acid side. The alkaline side is a lot more obvious, and it turned into a really subtle green. It's super pretty. I don't know if you can see it in the video. And then this would be the color of the elderberry, just neutral, and then going over into the acidic side. Maybe go a little bit heavier on the acidic, maybe add a little bit more vinegar to bring my acid down, I guess you'd say, to see if I can't get a difference in color like I did between these two pieces. So this was without just a neutral pH, and this was with an acidic bath. So there's a difference there. It's more visible to the eye than maybe in the camera. Turned a little redder, I think. The elderberry is a lot more neutral than I would have expected, although when I did the Easter eggs, it was pretty darn brown. So I probably should have expected that. But wow, that color that's a beautiful sort of greenish color. Really, really pretty. I will move these baths, not to waste them, but I'll move them into a bigger bowl and do the same process with the produce bag. Increase my acid slightly. If I do it equivalent on either side, 7's neutral, I took it up to a 10 on the alkaline side, then I should maybe try to get it down to a 4 on the acid side. So we'll try that out and see what happens. I will tell you that elderberry surprised me. I was secretly hoping for potentially a different color from this herb, but I will say that I thought the pH shifted color on the alkaline side was a gorgeous color. And the two of those colors, or the three of those colors, if you look at the acid side together, are beautifully complementary. There is a reddish hue and a greenish hue. And if you know anything about your color theory, those are opposites on the color wheel and therefore work really well together. Anyway, what's the point of all of this? Well, twofold. One is that pH is real, it doesn't affect everything, but if you are working with certain dyes and the color is sensitive to pH, you can have unexpected shifts that you didn't know about, which can be very surprising and also wonderful. And the second piece of it is that if you are working with a dye matter that is pH sensitive, know that you can just expand your palette by playing around with it. To me, it appears that elderberry falls more sensitive to the alkaline side. I could see a very slight difference with the acidic side. It appeared maybe brighter than the neutral elderberry, but it was very, very slight. Keep that in mind as you are working your way through different kinds of dye matter, that you may have the potential to play around a little bit more with the pH and experience some different colors. All right, I have some big news to share with you. And that is, I am moving. So this kitchen that you've gotten used to, there's only gonna be one more video filmed here, and I will be moving on to a different environment. However, join me next week on Color Quest as we do a frenzy of working with all of my existing dyes that I have accumulated over the last year and a half. And I don't know, we'll just kind of play around, see what we can pull together in the dye pot with all of those dyes that you've seen sprinkled across here for years. So have a wonderful week. Look forward to seeing you in my last video here at this location. But not to worry, we'll be continuing on our color quest in a brand new kitchen studio soon to come. All right, see you next Friday. So join me today. Let my neighbors go. So join me today as we look to